What you have planned.
To a Hi, welcome back to a brand new video of the Targeted Individual Program, Target Individual Experience. And I was doing the introduction, and of course, you have the New York Predator Department outside engaging in, very subtly at low volume. I decided to do this video in this format because I had to put things into context. When I filmed the video on my way home, um, you know, they engage in a surprise hit, right? And I'm going to tell you guys exactly what it is. So for the past couple weeks, since I've been coming home, pretty early too, there haven't really been a lot of people hanging out on the block, right? But tonight, of course, they're there, right? Uh, Again, this is how they will attack you, right? And I'm going to play the video, but I first want to share some information. Again, I keep saying that we as Black people, we have a short-term uh, memory uh, condition, which have been programmed into us, and we have to understand. That sounds better. Understand what is going on, right? We, as particularly as Black people, right? But this applies to everybody in America too, right? How we all being manipulated. Some people love their manipulation because it gives them a feeling of feeling superior, right? It gives them certain privileges, right? Uh, Based on a false narrative, right? Based on a false construct of what we call race. So, and the reason why I want to do this because I want to show that what they're doing to us as TIs is nothing new. Okay, and they have used other groups of people, white people, also Hispanic people, Asian people, but the large majority of people who they've done a lot of these experimenting on are Black people, and particularly Black children. And I'm going to show you how from since the 1970s, right? They have been actively seeking to suppress the minds of Black people, particularly Black children and particularly Black male children, right? To control them. Then again, this comes out of the civil rights movement and for uh, our Christ of who are Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, uh, the Honorable um, Elijah Muhammad, right? Though I'm not religious, but I do recognize that they have been people who were sent, born into this world to awaken the minds of Black people. We can go further. We can go back to Malcolm X. We can go to Harriet Tubman. Go to Nat Turner, right? And so, not even just in America, but in Africa as well, in the Caribbean, in Europe, right? But I wanted to do this because, again, this is going to tie into the video and what it is that I'm going to be speaking about on the video and how, particularly when it comes to young Black people, particularly young Black men, criminalize and possibly uh, microchip, entering into the penal institution in which no one suspect a thing, right? Because the obsession with the most violent group of people on this planet, with Black people, okay, in terms of uh, they their personal stake in trying to stamp out, I guess, the violence in the mind in the genes of Black people, or our ability to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves, and our ability to unite, right? Just as white people did in this country, to revolt against their so-called oppressor King George, right? And then later, uh, half of America who did not want to give up slavery and went to war for slavery, and the other half who did not want, the other half who were engaging in slavery to have an economic superiority, okay, over them, right? And that economic superiority was due to the slave labor of enslaved African people. So, as a black person, I've understood this for some time now that the Civil War, okay, was not to solely to free black people. It was a strategic move by the North, Abraham Lincoln, and the Republicans in the North. Uh, really knew that if slavery was to continue, that the South would rise to power and overtake the North in terms of, uh, economic superiority, right? As Lincoln said in his own words, that if he can hold the Union together and allow the South to continue its enslavement of African people, he would. Okay, that's what he said. So when I see us as black people, we're quoting Abraham Lincoln as if he's some savior. No, he's not a savior. He's a savior to the white northern class. He's not a savior to black people. And again, we we love symbolism because we've been conditioned into uh, viewing symbolism as something that's monetary. And though, with the Civil War, yes, black people was freed, okay, but black enslaved people, and eventually probably would have been free, but it would have been much later. But they were freed because, again, it wasn't because of the goodness of Northerners, though they had a lot of them who engaged in abolitionism, right? Or they were abolitionists, right? But again, I'm not just saying this to say that there aren't good white people out there. I've said that constantly. There are good white people out there. There's just not enough of them, right? And so let's not be, you know, deceived by I shouldn't say by the narrative that's put forth. Okay, slavery was not ending slavery was not a top priority. It was preventing the South from growing economically. Okay, because of that free slave labor. Okay, because even after the end of the Civil War, you had the 10-year Reconstruction period where um, black people saw some progress, but it was quickly shot down by whites in the South and whites in the North. All right. Okay. Um, so I just want to put some things into context because we don't look at the reality, right? We go by what the media tells us, what we see on television, what we read in the paper, right? But they only give you the information that they want to give you, right? To paint a narrative. Okay. So let's start speaking the reality. All right. So, um, Dr. Peter Bragan, very, very courageous man, one of our Caucasian uh, brothers are Caucasian Christ, right? And yes, I give him that title. He's still alive today. And I give him that title because, Christ means anoint, to be anointed, right? In our Kemetic uh, spiritual system, when you reach a high level of consciousness, you become Christ like, meaning that you have reached your highest state of consciousness. And when you reach your highest state of consciousness, you do things like, like Dr. King, like Marcus Garvey, like Harriet Tubman, like Nat Turner, like Stephen Biko, like um, Nelson Mandela, you know, like a Thomas Sankara, right? Like Patrick Lumumba, right? Like Malcolm X, like Dr. Khalid Muhammad. Okay. Just because you've reached your Christ consciousness does not mean that you're peaceful and docile and passive. It means that you also are willing to take up arms to die for what you believe in, to die to try to correct the ills of the society, the ills of the world. Okay? Only in Christianity they give you a passive figure called Jesus Christ. Okay? But if you go and read the history, like I said, go and read the Udayan Wars, not the Jewish wars, by Eusebius Flavian. All right. Again, the letter J was not created until the 1500s. All right. So many of you not going to even understand that because many of you don't even want to know. Right. Um, Information has become like uh, garlic to a vampire, right? When your very own Bible tells you that, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge because they've become too religious, too superstitious, right? So you become exactly what the Bible tell you not to become, and you reject knowledge, right? Anyhow, so Dr. Peter Bragan, who brought the attention to the Black community and also the Black community, but to uh, the government in terms of what these so-called neuroscientists and psychiatrists and psychologists were engaging in. Okay. And the purpose of them committing these experiments on Black children, non consensual, highly invasive brain surgery, right, is because they did not want Black boys to get to become Black men who will turn on their oppressors, right? And that's the reason. They still, listen, they still have that fear. Okay. But they create more of that uh, type of thinking in the minds of young Black men when they continue to do things to criminalize us, to oppress us, right? Turn us at odds with each other. And yet somehow, we have, well, not yet somehow, through technology and through psychology, okay, through economic castration, they have basically created this mindset to where Black people, particularly Black men, are not even consciously aware of the war against us. I mean, it's even worse for Black women. They don't even want to know about it. Okay. But for Black men, and again, that's the majority. You still have few Black men out there who understand, who are training, and for particularly for Black boys and Black men in urban cities, we're not thinking about that. Okay. And besides, in cities across America, large cities, the politicians, particularly if you're a Democratic control state, they have initiated these type of gun control laws in order to prevent black people from owning guns, right? So we can protect ourselves from their violence. All right. So I'm giving you some history here. Okay, coming from Dr. Peter Bragan, you can uh, check out his website. Um, let me go. This is his website. Okay. And how did I come to know Dr. Peter Bragan? Well, I was doing some research on, um, you know, mind control and brain chipping, right? Brain computer interface, BCI. And we've been hearing a lot about that within the past decade. That this is new and this is, this is in the works. It's coming down the pipeline. You know, this is how they fool us. All right. This is how they fool us until you start to get into the truth. When you start to see that they, since the 1960s, they have been developing BCI, in its earliest form. All right. And sometimes in a very crude form. Okay. But by the 1970s, they have been able to create what is called a stem receiver, which is a receiver transmitter, in which they have inserted into the shoulder, and this is Dr. Jose Delgado. You guys can see the video on YouTube where he has a remote control in his hands, and there's a bull charge, and he pressed the remote control, and the bull stops and turns away. Okay, and this was done remotely using radio waves. Okay, and having the an example of a device implanted into the brain of a test subject. In this case, it was a bull, and being able to use the radio radio signal, all right, and a control to stop the bull from charging. Okay, and I started to say to myself again, like, knowing that whatever I was going through, that I knew that I had been microchipped because again, when I was thinking certain things, you had the New York Predator Department would be using their sirens, anything like that. Um, when I would read a book or something like that, let's say if I'm reading a book on Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or, you know, any black civil rights leader, anything like that, when certain words would appear and I would read them, they would be using the sirens. Words like revolution, um, words like uh, anything that has to do with any sort of weapons training, anything like that, they will be using their sirens. Okay. And on top of that, I would get up on the weekend and go to a specific destination, and there would be white men in front of that establishment giving me the thumbs up. All right. And I was saying to myself, what the heck is going on here? What's going on? But anyway, I've talked about this many times, and don't want this video to be too long because I do want to show the video that I did earlier on my way home. So, Peter Bergen, the Bergen's first and second violence initiative, right? So, Dr. Bergen campaigned to stop the what he now calls the first violence initiative began in the early 1970s and resulted in his stopping the return of lobotomy and psychosurgery, psychiatric brain mutilation from resurging throughout the Western world. Some Harvard psychiatrists and surgeons were advocating the surgery as a cure for ghetto violence on the grounds that the black leaders of urban uprising must have something wrong with their brains. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want you guys to understand the mindset of these people. And if you think that their mindset have changed, it hasn't. What they have done is now gotten more crafty and now getting the very same people, right, who they want to stamp out any kind of violence in their brain. And never mind you that white people are the most violent people on this planet. but you're not seeing them trying to stamp out violence in the minds of young black young white males, right? You are not. They don't do that. Okay. So when I talk about being aware and being awakened, this is part of that process and understanding how white violence work on black people, and also how they can manipulate black people to do that job for them, right? To identify, they will identify those who they perceive as a threat. They will engage in covert warfare using technologies that, again, highly classified, using drugs, using money, okay, in order to either control or destroy that potential threat. And this is something that we as black people, we always have to keep in our mind. We always have, whenever they do things in secret, whenever you see things are highly compartmentalized, meaning that there is always go between, right? So they can engage in plausible deniability. So they can give you the runaround, right? And an example would be, you know, the uh, investigative journalists finding out that the New York City Police Department were actually riding around with X-ray vans. Do you know how dangerous X-rays are? Right? But all of a sudden now, the NYPD become expert, right? In in radio, in radiation and radio technology, right? Such as X-ray machines, put them in the back of vans or inside of a van and taking X-ray of vehicles outside, and then claiming that it's not a harm to citizens, right? I mean, where is the study that says it's not a harm to the general public, right? But yet that's what they're doing, right? These are gun ho, uh, um, what do you call this? They think that they're in the wild, wild west, okay? And what else have they been up to? What else have they been up to? So, like I said, I give the history because many of us don't want to believe that this has happened before. Many of us don't want to believe that this is still happening, right? Okay. I mean, particularly since we still see that black children are being poisoned with lead, but yet somehow we don't think that that's environmental warfare, right? And we've been so conditioned into passivity that we just accept whatever narrative they tell us, all right? So, because for us it's like, well, because now we're highly individuals. So if it's not me and mine, I can care less, right? That's what they say. Okay. So again, I just read about how these people, these psychiatrists, these neurosurgeons, you know, believe that the leaders, black leaders, right? So that's with Black Lives Matter. They did a very excellent, a meticulous job of taking down that organization. And they did it in where we don't even have a clue how they did it, but I do. Okay. And there are others that do as well. So you may look at the leaders and say, well, yeah, they kept all the money. They bought multi-million-dollar homes and stuff like that. Yeah, because they were manipulated, right? They were given a new consciousness where it now becomes all about them, right? Me and mine, right? That's how are they doing it? Through infiltration and also through the silent sound spread spectrum technology. Okay. So Dr. Bragan was most appalled by ghoulish operations on little black children at the University of Mississippi in Jackson, which he completed stopped. The second violent initiative was conducted at a time when Ginger Bergen had become his wife and partner in reform work, and she played a major role. It was entirely focused on stopping a racist, eugenic, multi agency federal program aimed at identifying genetics and biological causes for violence in inner city children and at finding drug treatment. The Bergen team completely shut down this huge federal effort. So again, we're talking about the federal government. So when I talk about my targeting, right, my the drugging, the implantation of a microchip, right, the manipulation, the covert manipulation, the covert psychological manipulation, it is a multi-agency federal program. Okay, that has not changed. They just find new ways to lie and cover it up, and they are very good at lying and covering things up. Okay, yeah, you see the as I said the word up. See, they hate it when any black person that they try to destroy, right, comes out on top. They hate it when they fail, right? When they've invested money, effort, manpower, drugs, all this stuff, right? To try to take down black people or black person or black persons, right? Because as Dr. Ray Higgins said, you know, been, when you've been, when you are the one teaching lies for centuries, for decades, right? You have to be, you have a vested interest in continuing to deceive and to cover up that lie because you know that if the truth was to be revealed, right, that would be the end of not only your lie, but your control. Okay? So, the first violent initiative. In 1971, I discovered that psychiatrists and neurosurgeons were planning and implementing a worldwide revival of psychosurgery. At the time, I was not an activist, but I was aware that no one had publicly opposed the first round of lobotomy in the 1940s and 1950s. I decided to take a stand. My medical training convinced me that improving the techniques of psychosurgery, of psychiatric surgery, for example, by replacing the scalpel with hot electrode would not make the intervention any less damaging without harming the brain. There was no therapeutic effect. There could be no therapeutic effect. The surgery must destroy enough function to flatten the patient's emotions. Okay, so I want you to understand what it is that they do. When they say flatten the patient's emotion, meaning to make them emotionless, to take away their emotion. This is what they do with us as TIs and also particularly us as black people. Though we are still highly emotional, right? We just are emotional about the wrong things. When it comes to each other's men and women, when it comes to the showing the love, true love and affection, we are less emotional about that. What we are emotional is about the fact that if we can't control each other, right? And particularly when it comes to, you know, how they create this belief in our mind, particularly in our woman's mind, black woman's mind, that black men have to do whatever they say, right? So when you say no, they become very emotional, right? But when it comes to the emotion of feeling sorry, apologizing, uh, loving, being supportive, right? Because all of that is not just action, but also emotions, because you have emotional support. That's part of your emotional support, along with the physical support, also, right? That is completely gone, right? And so, you know, I would advise to go read the New York Times article, what kind of human do we want to create? A 1970 New York Times article with interview with Dr. Jose Delgado, all right, was a pioneer in the creation of radio, a microwave microchip, which they call the stem receiver, which can wirelessly alter the behavior of the human mind. Okay? So, there is no way to accomplish that without creating more widespread mental devastation, including the relative loss of essential human qualities such as creativity. I used to be very creative. I am no longer creative. Spontaneity, personal responsibility, self insight, social sensitivity and awareness, and judgment. So, why do they engage in a coercive persuasion programming when you are microchipped? Again, it is to do exactly that, but also to hide the fact that you have been implanted with a microchip, that your behavior, that your personality is being hijacked, right? Is being hijacked. And to create a new personality, one that is detrimental to the victim and to the people around them, of them. Okay. So psychiatry again is used to mask and cover up these kind of non-consensual human experimentation programs. Okay. So research and my personal experience would confirm this initial impression. Psychosurgery, individual vulnerability, and public health. Shortly after beginning my opposition to psychosurgery, I came under attack in the national media from an unexpected source. Three Harvard professors, psychiatrists Frank Irvin and neurosurgeons Vermont Mark and William Sweet. Sweet was director of neurosurgery at perhaps the most respected hospital in the world, the Massachusetts General. Mark was head of the Department of Neurosurgery at Boston City Hospital. As the controversy heated up, a physician who asked for anonymity directed me to publish remarks made by the three doctors concerning the use of brain surgery to suppress black urban rioters. Now, what have I been saying? Right? What I've been saying is that white people, right, are as a whole, the majority, whether the Republican or Democrats, conservative or liberal, the majority, are upset with the civil rights movement, particularly black people standing up and showing the world how evil and wicked America was to the black man, woman, and child. Okay? And they have never forgotten that. Okay? Because when you understand the mindset of the Caucasian, you understand why. It is innate within them. And I say innate because when you have oppressed a people for so long, and generation after generation, you teach your children that they are superior, okay? It becomes innate within them. All right? So the idea of black people standing up, again, this is why when in corporation, black women were given corporate jobs before black men, because for black women, it's easy for white men to have some sort of control, whereas a black man who might be smarter, more intelligent, right? They don't want that feeling of being, that feeling of being inferior. And it's not really inferior. It's the fact that that black man may know more than that white man. So that white man cannot handle that. So black women became, black women were mostly hired in those corporate jobs. They wasn't paid as they should have been paid, but they were hired. And so what does that do to the minds of that black woman? Now she's hanging out with white men and white women. She's having sex with them, right? She's been introduced to alternative sexual lifestyle, drugs, right? Because she wants to be, cool with everybody, and she wants to be the party girl, right? This is the mindset. This is why you see even today how these, particularly the financial system, that they having all these programs for black women, right? But this is what they put out in the media. But then when you look at how much money they're actually giving, so they make a promise, $5 billion to black women entrepreneurship, but they're not giving that money. They're not giving that $5 billion. They may give 5 million. Okay, but it's that those deceptive measures, those deceptive things that they do, right? They're always going to be deceptive. That's just in their nature. Okay, it is. Just as how they can say, well, violence is in our nature, when we know, who've committed the most violence on this planet. Okay, within the past 500 years, we know who committed the most violence on this planet. We know who also continue to manipulate other groups of people to commit violence. Okay, all right. Like I said, it's not. I'm not preaching hatred for white people. I'm just speaking the truth. Okay, and don't take my word for it. You can go and you can do the research. You have good white people, good white brothers and sisters who are telling the truth, right? But we choose to ignore it because, again, we are operating on an automatic conditioning. We don't stop and we don't think. We don't think critically. We just believe, right? We just believe. Anyhow, psychosurgery, individual vulnerability, and public health. Shortly after beginning my opposition to psychosurgery, I came under attack in the national media from I think I just read that. All right, let's see here. Where was I? Okay, so as the controversy heated up, if a physician who asks for anonymity direct me to publish remarks made by 3 doctors concerning the use of brain surgery to suppress black urban rioters. Soon after, in 1973, I received a brown envelope from an unidentified source in the Department of Justice. It contained an in-house memo documenting that Mark and Irvin were receiving funding. This is again they received this from the Department of Justice. So they know what's going on. So for TIs out there who say, oh, the FBI don't know and this and that, apparently you yourself need to do more research and understand that with these programs, all these government agencies, because it is a multi-agency corporation. Okay. So it contained an in-house memo documenting that Mark and Irvin were receiving funds from the National Institute of Mental Health, the NIMH, for experiments in psychosurgery for violence control. Meanwhile, Irvin was also receiving money from the Department of Justice for research on genetic factors in violent crime. Sweet was involved as a supporter, co-author, and a member of the private foundation that funneled the government funds to Mark and Irvin. In the 1967 letter entitled Role of Brain Disease in Riots and Urban Violence, okay, and I want you to understand what they're doing here, okay? What they're doing is that they're laying the groundwork to cover what they've been working on for the past 2 decades. Now, talk about the mindset of these people, individuals, right? Not individuals, but these people, right? These white people who have the dark triad personality traits, who position themselves in positions of power and authority. Okay, because the one thing I know about white people when it comes to black people is that what they tell the world about us, eventually they will condition us to be what they tell the world about us. And it's not good. Okay? Just as how pharmaceutical companies create drugs for uh, psychiatric disease that they have not yet invented. So they create the drugs, then they create the diagnosis, then they create the disease, right? And now psychiatric doctors are now prescribing, diagnosing individuals with this new disease now. And look, they have the drug for it already. Okay. We're not dealing with, you know, uh, uh, normal people here. Okay. These people are highly intellectual, highly skilled, but they have the disease called Wedico. And brilliant people can be psychopaths. Okay. Don't think psychopaths are the low person in society, but you have brilliant people who are psychopaths, who are in positions of power, who are surgeons, doctors, psychiatrists, neurosurgeons, engineer, chemists, scientists. Okay, but they have us believing that the sociopath is the it's the criminal who grew up in poverty. All right, and I talked about this earlier in my one of my videos when I talk about how they prey on black people, particularly when it comes to the housing crisis, the bubble that crashed in 2008, but it also affected white people, right? And white people were often themselves and their family because they couldn't live, they couldn't what do you call it? They couldn't scale down the the way they used to live, downsize. Yeah, they couldn't downsize, right? So these white men were, deleting themselves and also deleting themselves and their families. Okay, so even in industries that you may not think you may have sociopaths and psychopaths, you have sociopaths and psychopaths. There's a reason why people who have those personality traits are majority white. Okay, and again, you have to do some deep research, and I would recommend the book "The Iceman Inherited" by "The Iceman Inheritance" by Michael Bradley. Okay, this was a white Canadian scholar. Okay, all right. There are other books too. On the Yaruga, I forgot the name of the author, black author. You should read that book too. Okay, so where was I? All right, so in a 1967 letter entitled Role of Brain Disease in Rise in Urban Violence in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, Mark, Sweet, and Irvin, much like current violent initiative advocate, focus on individual vulnerability rather than upon larger social, economic, and political factors. Okay? So we know, right? But again, you have to understand how white people, the majority, view black people and how they have done everything since uh, slavery ended to ensure that black people will never take up arms in revolt. Right? And now, going forward, as the Russian scientists and newspaper columnist says, when they realize that, not only are the West working on mind control weapons using radio wave and microwave frequency, but also the Russians were doing it. And what they said, and like I said, some things I don't forget. It's like imagine countries, government in the West having these weapons, right? they can basically subdue their population, right? They can making the population content in the violation of their civil rights. Is it um, uh, and docile in their uh, oppression? Okay. Again, these are from declassified documents on Russian uh, mind control uh, experiments using radio wave and microwave frequency spectrum, what they call biogenerators. Right. Anyhow, I don't remember exactly everything, but the documents, I have the documents. Okay. Um, let's see. All right. So they ask if slum conditions alone determine and initiate riots, why are the vast majority of slum dwellers able to resist the temptation of unrestrained violence? Is there something peculiar about the violent slum dweller with that differentiates him from his peaceful neighbor? Well, here's the thing, right? The so-called peaceful neighbor is believe in his or her mind that they got a little more slice of the pie, actually not slice of the pie, of more of the crumbs, right, than the person who will protest. And again, people will protest when, particularly black people, because we are emotionally and psychologically scarred by what the U.S. government have done to us, right? And look, I wasn't born here, right? And when I say us, because I don't see myself different from any black person in any country all over the world. Okay, I'm a black American, I'm a black Canadian, I'm a black British. I'm a black Caribbean, right? I'm a black Russian. I'm a black German. I'm a black Japanese. Okay, I see myself as one with my people, and I also see myself as one with humanity. Those who are white, brown, yellow, black, whatever color, whatever ethnicity, if you stand for the rights of everyone, if you stand against tyranny, if you stand against those who are oppressing other people based on their ethnicity, the color of their skin, I'm one with you. If you are against revolution to overthrow tyrannical government, even in democratic countries, I'm with you. And as I said, that revolution again, right? I'm with you. You know, I would say if I have the knowledge that I have now when I was in as a teenager in my 20s, okay? If we as black people had the knowledge when we were young, right, they would not have been able to put so many of us in this trap, in this prison of society. Okay? So, anyhow, um, and again, as I said, so the so-called, and they use the word violence, right? But they were not violent. There were a few people who committed violence, right? As with anything, when white people sports team lose, we see that they commit violence. When black people suffering under oppression, right, are psychologically uh, damaged because you see an innocent black person get killed for no reason other than some racist pig, uh, you know, thinking that he can continue to engage in trauma-based fear conditioning. We are emotionally scarred and hurt. But they never seem to talk about white violence. And white people will commit acts of violence over the most stupidest thing. Your sports team lost. Your college football team lost. Your hockey team lost. Right? black people don't commit so-called violence. And I said so-called because that's a quotation, right? Over sports team losing. We commit. We some of us will engage, but also, I said some, very small. But you also have white people who have been who have will infiltrate these protests, including police officers, and initiate violence. Okay, so let's not forget that. All right. Anyhow, like I said, their time's going to be up because once we start to realize what's going on, when I say their time's going to be up, I'm not talking about in terms of, you know, um, physical war. And if it comes down to that, then so be it. But I'm talking about black people stop being manipulated and tricked by these deceivers and these liars. Okay. And also white people. When white people need to wake up too. All right. Same thing with my Hispanic brothers and sisters. Right. My Asian brothers and sisters. You need to wake up. If you want America to be what is America supposed to be, then the people that are in power, they need to be driven out of power. Okay? And black people have to get what they deserve, right? Which is reparation. Okay? So me doing this is helping to show that, when it comes to reparation, black Americans black of enslaved people of Africa in America deserve reparation and they should get it. And white people know this. Okay? They know this. All right? So, Mark, Sweet, and Irvin went on to suggest that this peculiarity was brain dysfunction. They called for large scale studies of the inner city to pinpoint, diagnose, and treat those people with low violence threshold before they contribute to further tragedies. Now, who are committing the most tragedies in America to other groups of people, including themselves? All right, when we talk about the opioid epidemic, all right, we talk about the meth epidemic, all right, we talk about these uh, uh, psychiatrists who are prescribing these drugs, and where you see young white males engaging in serious acts of violence. Okay, it isn't black people. You may bring up the crack cocaine era, but that was perpetrated on the black community by white people in the government. Okay, so like I said, I don't have to make up a false narrative. Okay, the truth is out there. I don't have to make anything up. I don't have to manipulate a white person. Okay, I don't have to do that. I don't have to pay other black people to lie or white people to lie. I don't have to, send honey traps, right, to engage in, all sorts of, criminal activity. Okay, or to manipulate them into sending honey traps to manipulate a person, right, to get into a relationship or to get pregnant or to, give them STD, right, or to give them drugs when when their back is turned or when they're sleeping. I don't need to do that. Okay, that's the difference between those who are doing this and we as TIs. Okay, so in a supportive medical news reported a few weeks later, JAMA lauded Mark and Irvin psychosurgery as a public health measure. Mark and Irvin must have felt they were on a heroic Nobel Prize winning endeavor, providing a solution to worldwide mayhem. Again, we talk about the exaggeration of white people when it comes to black people, particularly these white racist cops, the magical Negro or Akon fall on my hood. So somehow the super predator that I have in the back seat, he had super strength. He didn't have a gun, but somehow he thought of the gun and it appeared in his hand and he started shooting at me. And so I had to do a roll and a flip and lay on my back and shoot into the police car, then turn over and lay on my stomach and shoot into the police car and talk about shots fired. And here comes my partner now. Yeah, shots fired, start shooting into the car. But holy shit, the magical Negro didn't get hit. See what I mean? Black people, particularly black men, they're magical, right? They are magical. Anyhow, in 1968, did I finish read this? Okay. Mark and Urban must have felt they were on a heroic Nobel Prize in winning endeavor, providing a solution to worldwide mayhem, and especially to America's urban uprising. In 1968, the year in which they were aggressively experimenting on patients, they wrote in Psychiatric Opinion that brain dysfunction was equally important to poverty, unemployment, and substandard housing as a cause of urban violence. They estimate that tens of millions of Americans might be violent prone as a result of brain damage. It's funny because how come they never bring up that when it comes to lead poisoning of black children and black adults? Hmm? Right? And how come the government in America, up until today, don't hold those accountable, particularly in government agencies that are in charge of housing, to make sure that there are no lead paints left in any public housing, or particularly in any housing in America. Okay? So, when I said in America, see, the one thing I will not allow you predators in the police department to do or in the government to do is to silence me. Okay? You see, it would be different if those that are in power, white people, because they're the ones that are in power, right, are doing things to make up for the past ills of America against black people, but they're not doing it. That's not what they're doing. They are continuing to oppress black people in new ways, right? They are continuing to criminalize black people in new ways. But somehow you think that I'm supposed to be silent and just allow you to keep not only exploiting, but experimenting, manipulating, taking away our children's future. And you think that you using your sirens, because I say in America, as if I'm supposed to run, you're not listening. But that's what happens when you have psychopaths and sociopaths who are in positions of authority. Okay? Who are in the financial system, who are in corporate America, who are in the hospitals, all right? Killing black people in their ritualistic killing of black people. So when you see or hear doctors white doctors who are the doctors of black women who give birth in the living room, and then we see that uh, more black women die from childbirth than any other group, And yet we don't think racism has something to play with it, to do with it, right? When we hear of white doctors dismissing black women's pain, sending them home, and then these black women are dying, we don't think racism has a part to play in it. But not only racism, but the meditated murder of black people and black women deliberately. And the excuses, oh, it was an accident. And these doctors are never punished. The hospital may get sued. But as black people, we have to understand white people's psychotic mindset when it comes towards us. I keep saying this. White people, when it comes to the relationship with black people, is a psychopathic one. If they can get away with murdering a black person, they don't think twice about it. Okay? Just like police officers. And I just recently, when I watched a video of again, it was a police officer breaking into a black man's apartment, breaking into his bedroom door, and he's sleeping, and they startle him and shoots him in the heart. All right. And then you hear one of the officers saying stop, and the other one said, I'm so sorry. Well, what about procedures? What about procedures? See, when it's a black person, particularly a black man, and like I keep saying, white people are very manipulative. Okay. We don't think that these sort of murder of black men and black women, that there's more behind it, that it's not a trauma-based fear programming, which it is carried out in the society against black people by white people, white police officers. Okay? I mean, think about it. You have police officers, white police officers, walking into apartments that's not theirs and killing the person that their apartment belongs to. You have police officers who showing up an hour late to a domestic dispute, right? Not even asking any information, right? Not even, all of a sudden their department policies goes out the window, and they start making up their own shit. They start making up these ridiculous laws in their mind. And you can go to YouTube, you see tons of videos of police body cam doing exactly what I just said, lying, planting drugs, right? Making up their own policies in their mind, superseding the law, making up their own law, lying about it. That's police culture in America, particularly white police culture. Right? So what I'm saying is, I'm not making this shit up. Like I said, I don't have to. Unlike what they have to do, manipulate, engage in covert psychological operation, covert operation within our communities. Right? So, the one thing about these sociopaths and psychopaths, these dark triad personality types, is that they don't want to be called out. Right? They believe that, they're supposed to keep stepping on our necks, choking us out, right? And we're not supposed to do anything about it. We're not supposed to say anything. We're supposed to let it happen. As a black person, I see what it is that they're doing. Like I said, I can see the manipulation. Okay, the past decade and a half, I've dedicated myself to studying what they were doing to me and others. So I know what it is that they do. And they know. They know. But again, when they're in a position of power and authority, and they can create the narrative, they can change the narrative, they can hide the truth, they can cover up their crimes, they can lie, they can get rid of witnesses, right? They can destroy people's lives, right? They can turn good cops into bad cops. They can punish those who expose their crime and get away with it. All right. That's not a police force. That's a federal authorized criminal organization. Okay. All right. In 1968, a year in which they were aggressively experimenting on patients, they wrote in Psychiatric Opinion that brain dysfunction was equally important to poverty, uh, unemployment, and substandard housing as a cause of urban violence. They estimate that tens of millions of Americans might be violent prone as a result of brain damage. In testimony on civil disorders before the New York State, again, listen to this is New York, right? So you must say, oh, it's 1968. We see how things are getting worse here. Okay. It's not getting better. All right. So, in testimony on civil disorders before the New York State Legislative Committee in 1968, Byrd 1968, William Sweet said mass violence might be touched off by leaders suffering from temporal seizure of the brain. Sweet made a pitch for the electrical stimulation of surgically implanted electrode in as a method of calming violent people. See, I know they don't want me to pull up the Baltimore public health record on of in which over something like 14,000 uh, young boys' DNA was stolen by the Baltimore public health department. All right. So what about Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Florida? Because if you know if it was happening in Baltimore, it was happening in other cities too, right? Please tell me you know that, right? And that you're not that naive to think that it was just Baltimore. Okay. Anyhow, um, Mark Irvin and Sweet had their greatest PR coup when their work made the cover of Life on June 21st, 1968. Rosenfield, 1968. I said 1968. Life observed the psych the psycho the psychobio the psychobiology approach, new as it is gaining adherence so fast that it might almost be called a movement. Life seemed to endorse the effort towards biomedical social control. Okay. Let me say that they have been working on this and they have already achieved it. Okay. But when I say they have already achieved it, meaning that those within the society, particularly in black communities, who they see as potential leaders, and in order to stop them and eliminate them, they have engaged in covert operation and covert psychological operation using technology such as silent sound to manipulate those individuals, men, women, boys, girls. This is why we have no black leaders today, right? And how they also go about eliminating their so-called threats is by the people around them, your friends, family members, girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives. I talk about Malcolm X's grandson, who wanted to uh, start to get into political activism, gets invited by a friend to Mexico, gets into a fight, gets killed. His friend, every time his friend didn't help him, And again, when you are Malcolm X's grandson, you have to be more aware that the government killed your grandfather, right? And so you have to consider what has happened to you, the difficult life that you've had is a perpetration by the US government. Okay? And people in the black community, like I said, we have a short term memory. Instead of looking out for Malcolm X children, we just forget about them. Not understanding that when this government targets you, they target your family and they'll target you for your families for generation. If they do not destroy your lineage, right, they will seek to control, to create a new personality, and to edit out your ancestors, their personalities that is within you. Okay? I know you've heard of gene editing, right? So they can just do more than give you blue eyes and blonde hair. Okay? All right. So Mark, Irvin, and Sweet had their greatest PR coup. Or did I read this already? Yes. Yeah. All right. In those biomedical control. All right. Okay. So in a slum neighborhood, everyone may live under the same frustrating set of pressures and tension, but only a small minority will engage in rioting. And even among the rioters, only a handful will actually burn down a building or assault another person. Thus, psychobiology proceeds on the premise that violence acts are carried out by violent individuals, even if the individuals are part of a mob. So, what do they call the so-called white Americans when they felt that they were being taxed too much? Hmm? Do they call them a violent mob? Do they call them violent criminals? Hmm? Do they call the was it the January 11th insurrection? Did they ever call those people violent and call them mobs? Hmm? The article gave a big spread to Mark and Irvin psychosurgery for violence. The fate of Thomas R. In their book, Violence in the Brain, 1970, and elsewhere, Mark and Irvin described Thomas R., sometimes called Leonard K., as a young white man, largely saved from epilepsy and completely saved from violence by psychosurgery. When describing his outcome, they mentioned no serious side effect. He was their star patient. And before I continue reading this, right? See, how is it that we know that they have been experimenting on black children, right? We know that. Okay, we know that. You know, Dr. Bergen, he exposed it. All right, and so what white people will do is to cover up the horrible crimes against black people as they did when they hid the information on Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. When the living descendants or living people who are still living, right, were passing on this story and talking about this story, they couldn't find any newspaper articles about it. They had to go on a deep dive search in order to find the newspaper articles, right? So when you look at when that happened to when the truth coming out, okay, look at how long it took for the truth to come out because they hid the truth. Okay. And again, I'm not, hey, I'm not calling them liars. Like I said, when I say this, I'm not speaking about every white person, but I know the majority. Okay, and the majority, it could be 51%, but in when it comes to black people and how white people feel about black people, the majority is somewhat of 70 to 75%. Okay, and again, I'm not saying this. Go look at the statistics. Go look at these surveys that they do. Okay, go look at reparations. What white people think about black people getting reparations. Right. Go look at what white people think about social welfare programs that benefit them. They're all for it, but as soon as you put in, but it will also benefit black people, then they change their support of those programs. I'm not saying this. Go look do the research. You'll see. All right. See, that's the reality that I look at. Not because they're gentrifying communities and where black people live, right? Not because, you live in the same building and they're saying hi to you, okay? Because they're not sending their children to the new zone school, even after being in the community for 3, 4 years. They're not changing their children school. They're not doing that. So I look at those things, okay? And that's how we need to start looking at things. Not what we believe, but what they have shown us and continue to show us, what they do, not what they say. Okay? So, in their book, Violence on the Brain and Elsewhere, Mark and Irvin describe Thomas R., sometimes called Leonard K., as a young white man, largely saved from epilepsy and completely saved from violence and psychosurgery. When describing his outcome, they mentioned no serious side effect. He was their star patient. The patient's mother, Mrs. G., read my criticism of Mark and Irvin in the Boston Globe and realized for the first time what had been done to her son. She wrote to me, in reality, he had been reduced almost to a vegetable. Thomas' tragic story is retold in detail in Bergen's and Bergen, A War Against Children. All right. So Kerry's talking about, you know, um, losing their funding. Let's skip that and let's go to operating on little black children. As far as we know, Mark and Irvin did not perform any psychosurgery experiments on any African Americans. That's as far as we know, right? With more limited, just as Dr. Robert Heath, right, who we know experimented on black patients, but there's very little record of that. Okay, so they will purposely hide or destroy the information when it comes to experimentation on black people because in order was not to make them look racist, but they will only share information with them experimented on white people. Okay, which at the time, as Dr. Robert Heath, a quote from one of I think it was a nurse, and he said that that black people are in abundance, right? And because they're cheaper than cats, right? So they were experimenting on a lot of black people. Okay. With more limited political aims, perhaps another surgeon was operating on numerous black children. When I began researching the return of psychosurgery in the early 1970s, I quickly came upon the work of O.J. Andy, director of neurosurgery at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss in Jackson. He was publishing report on multiple surgical intervention into the brain of small children. Listen to this, ages 5 to 12, who were diagnosed as aggressive and hyperactive. See, now what they do is they'll diagnose, the schools are going to diagnose your children with ADHD, right? Attention deficit disorder, right? And the drugs that they give them. Okay, you really need to start looking into the side effect of these drugs, right? See, when I was experiencing what I experienced and I started talking about, being followed and, stuff like that was happening to me. I was told I was paranoid. I was prescribed Respinol, you know, and then like one side of my face started to slump, right? My stomach was bloated, and I was on there for a couple of years, right? Didn't know about the danger of it, right? Was never told, right? But on this website, what is called to drive dyskinesia, okay, which is a antipsychotic medication, right? And who's more likely to experience the most side effects? Oh, again, you think that these people don't know what they do when they create these drugs, okay, right? So who are more likely to get most of the side effects? Women who has gone through menopause, if you're over age 55, if you use alcohol or drugs, or African American and Asian American. Okay, now that's just a little side note because I did this so you guys can go and read about it. All right, you have to be very, these pharmaceuticals are working with the psychiatrists to dupe us, because again, it's about money. All right, but anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand. All right, so uh, again, ages, right? Small children ages 5 to 12 were diagnosed with aggressive and uh, hy- who were diagnosed as aggressive and hyperactive. Of his 30 to 40 patient, he wrote me in 1971, most were children. Before the controversy hit the press, I phoned Andy, who told me he could not recall the race of any of the children. Really? See my point? Later, I conducted a civil rights. I contacted. I con. Sorry. Later, I contacted a civil rights attorney in Mississippi who was able to determine that most of them were housed in a segregated black institution for the mentally disabled. The attorney got into the wards where the nurses told him with frustration that Andy had a completely free hand of picking children for psychosurgery. Okay. Now, you see, white people, they reward their killers of black people, their neurosurgeons, their highly regarded neurosurgeons who commit, some of the most atrocious acts on black people, including black children. They're rewarded. And you know what black Sambos and Sambinas do? They participate. They go to the award ceremony and they clap. Where's my clap? Right? They clap. Right? They they brag on social media about how their child is a rogue scholar, not understanding who Cecil Rose was. Okay? So, 1966, Andy described JM, age 9, who was hyperactive, aggressive, combative, explosive, destructive, sadistic. And again, these are white people terminology, right? Because remember, you know, they started labeling black people who were protesters as schizophrenic. And they included a new symptoms which was never included in white people being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that was violent tendencies. Okay. So, over a 3-year period, Andy performed 4 separate mutilating operations involving at least 6 lesions with implanted electrodes. So, in the 1960s, they were implanting electrodes into the brains of young children, men and women, right? Why? Then they move from electrodes to microchips. Okay, not the ones that we have today. Okay, what they call the stemoceiver, created by Dr. Jose Delgado. All right, so the youngster was at first said to be doing well. In a subsequent 1970 article, Andy again claimed that JM is no longer combative and negative. Then he added, intellectually, however, the patient is deteriorated. While Andy did not take an activist political position like Mark Irvine and Sweet, he did tell B.J. Mason, a reporter for Ebony, that black urban rioters can have abnormal uh, pathologic brain and should undergo tests with whatever capacity we have now. Following worldwide publicity about his operations during the anti psychosurgery campaign in 1973, a committee of his peers at the university declared his research experimental. When Andy did not publish appropriate experimental protocols, he was prohibited from operating. Andy himself declared in 1980 that he had been forced to stop operation due to sociological pressures in his home community. Violence centered throughout urban America. In his 1973 State of the State message, California Governor Ronald Reagan announced plans to establish a biomedical facility, the Center for the Study of the Reduction of Violence. Supported. This is how fearful white people became, right? Because of the civil rights movement. That they never thought that black people would start to push back against how they were being treated. Okay? That after the civil rights movement, they created all this uh, anti-violent initiative, right? And particularly with the assassination of Martin Luther King and the Watts riot. Okay? You know, white people, it's okay when white people commit violence, um, against black people. Okay? And, white people will go out looking for black people to shoot and kill. We've seen them in the mob. Let's go kill black people. And black people are responding to violence that's been committed against them. Yeah, we burn down stores. We don't go looking for white people to beat up. Well, besides the Rodney King incident where you had, a few black men beating up the white truck, I forgot his name, right? But we constantly see white people, like even today, you still have sundown town in America. Okay, even today, they're still finding black men hung, and of course, the predator police departments are saying that it's you know, um, self deletion, which we know is not true, right? With no investigation happening afterwards. Okay, so the Center for the Study of Reduction of Violence, supported by state and federal funds. So don't think the federal government is not involved in illegally microchipping your sons, daughters. You might be included as well. Okay, and a lot of us don't want to believe that because the propaganda of Elon Musk and the what you call it, the BCI, right? But if in the 1970s they were able to create a chip in which they can implant it into the shoulder of a rhesus monkey, and where you can barely see the incision, and then the creator of that stemmer receiver, Dr. Jose Delgado, said that they are working on one that's even smaller. Okay? Then we know that Department of Defense, CIA, when it comes to technology, They're at least a decade, decade and a half, even 2 decades ahead of the private sector, and that they use academia as a propaganda tool to state that, well, we're going to fund this research at Harvard, at MIT, at Stanford, to look for a new way to store image, to look at how is, like, you look at DARPA in particular, go look at the DARPA M3, right? We're talking about microchip in which um, you can control planes or be integrated with your plane, right? The systems through BCI, right? Like I keep saying, don't be fooled by their propaganda, right? The technology is way more advanced than they let on to be. And the use of movies and television shows, sci-fi shows, to propagate that these things are happening and these things are going to be happening in the future, 100 years, 200 years from now. No, they happen in the now. Okay. Anyhow, I didn't want to make this too long, but hey, let's continue. All right. Where we at here? All right. Supported by state and federal funds, the first center was planned for the psychiatry development at UCLA, headed by Louis Jolly West, a flamboyant psychiatrist known for his ability to hitch himself to hot topics. An early draft of West's proposed UCLA center described using schools in Chicano and African American neighborhood to screen for possible. Early draft of West's proposed UCLA center described, or I just read that, for possible genetic defects, right? So this was in 1973. Then in 1992, we saw the same thing happening again, where you have the health department again looking at the DNA of which they stole, right, from black boys in particular, uh, to again look for genetic markers, right? Anyhow, it also mentioned the possibility of psychosurgery. The suggestion of psychosurgery for control of violence was especially menacing in California because Santa Monica neurosurgeon M.H. Brown was strongly advocating it. In a July 1972 letter to the Los Angeles Times, he wrote, "It is either this psychosurgery or a further escalation of violence and chaos in society that does not serve the best interests of the United States." Okay? Meanwhile, Frank Irvin left the collapsing Boston project and came to join West at UCLA. Irvin arrived at this critical juncture, alerted people to the center's potential dangers. Despite denial from psychiatrists, West and Irvin, the discovery of referencing to genetics and psychosurgery in the original proposal proved politically fatal. So they were still engaging in this psychosurgery, right? They did not give up hope on that. Okay? But again, I want you to understand the mindset of these individuals, of these people. All right. Opposed by the center and a coalition of West Coast reformers, the planned string of federal violence centers never got off the ground. Yeah, publicly. Okay. Remember, what they can't do publicly, they'll do it privately. Okay. All right. In 1972, the state of Michigan and the Lafayette Clinic of Wayne State University began planning an experimental psychosurgery program for the control of violence using voluntary inmates at the state hospital system. Gabe Kamowitz, at the time a Michigan legal service lawyer, heard about the upcoming medical event and intervened in the court on behalf of John Doe and 24 other states' psychiatric inmates scheduled for eventually enrolling in for ev- e- eventually eventual enrollment in the experimental program. Comparing blacks to bulls. Ernest Rodin was the chief neurologist and moving force behind the Lafayette Clinic's psychosurgery project. In 1972, Rodin wrote a lengthy speech describing psychosurgery and castration as fitting treatment for some of the violent behavior displayed in the riot that had raged in his city of Detroit. Ronan voiced doubts about doing psychosurgery without sterilization, because with psychosurgery alone, the now hopeful, more placid duo can inseminate other equally bull young females to produce further, equally dull young females to produce rather dull and aggressive offspring. Rawdon argued that children of limited intelligence tend to become violent when they are treated as equal. Okay? Are you listening? He wanted them brought up in an authoritarian lifestyle. And you guys hear the sirens? Hold up. Did you guys hear the? Oh, let me do my let me do my sirens effect. Okay. And declared that many of them, like aggressive bulls, should be turned into docile oxen by means of castration. In the neurologist's own words, it was time to get down to cold-blooded medical research dealing with individuals rather than masses. Yeah. Okay. This is pretty lengthy. I think I'm going to end it here. But I want you guys to understand, and for black people who listen to this video, understand how you're being manipulated, how you're being used. These people have the same mindset, okay? And the fact that they can get you to willfully participate, even though you may be deceived, the fact that you think that is okay, knowing the history of these people, the lies, the deceptions, the cover up, the secrecy. Oh, that's my stomach. I'm hungry. I've been talking it up for almost 2 hours. But yeah, this is why I do what I do. To bring what's hidden into the light. Okay. Anyhow, talk to you guys on the next video.